another episode of Reseller Evolution. My name's Scott.
And I'm Carl.
And today we're going to talk about something that puzzles me quite a bit. And that is, how can one reseller do very well on the same platform or in the same market?
Yeah.
So if you're on eBay, you got people doing well, you got people doing not so well. I experienced the same thing in the antique market, where you got some vendors doing extremely well and some vendors doing extremely poorly. But before we get into that, Carl, how was your week?
Oh, it was a pretty good week. Sales have gone up again for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. Well, I think I know why. I'm actually listing stuff. Have you ever tried listing stuff to see if it improves sales?
Well, I'm sure we'll be getting into that part of the of the topic today. We'll be getting into that, but I haven't really listened to anything lately because I've been really busy with my booth. The booth has been doing extremely well, and I've started a third booth. So you got to take in a lot of product for a large booth when it just starts out. So there's a lot of cleaning, there's a lot of sorting, there's a lot of things that are going on, and so I've been pretty busy with that. But
and that counts as listing. You're just listing in the booth. It still counts.
Yes. Yeah. But, no, that's true. That's true.
Like for me, I had one of those magical time periods yesterday when all of a sudden you feel like listing all your death pile stuff, and you just go at it, and you're like, wow, where did this superpower come from? How can I harness this for future stuff? So I was pretty happy with that. I went through, I listed some more train sets. I actually tested and listed a VH DVD player. That was pretty good. Some board games, a Starbucks espresso machine. I went nuts. So I'm pretty happy with that. And sales kind of been really good, like I said. So it's kind of nice. I'll have to do some packing, which is going to take up some time, but that's good.
Yeah, no, awesome. I think my death pile it's shrinking dramatically, and but I don't really call it a death pile because I know it's inventory for my booth. And I had the best Sunday, the best weekend, but definitely it was all mostly on Sunday I've ever had since I've been doing this for 8 years. Like
crazy.
It's crazy. Now, of course, I'm downstairs now, so I can do furniture and different things. But I had one guy come in and drop $700 on my booth. It's an even $700 because I give him a few discounts because he's buying so much. So we brought it down to that level, and but the store was busy all around. So so I'm trying to fill this booth up. I have 3 booths, and they're all in the same store, and I'm trying to fill one up. But so much is buying that I can't keep up right now. No. I mean, it's a good problem to have. What else am I doing? I'm sorting, I'm cleaning, I'm getting stuff ready for eBay. There's a lot going on because the death pile is kind of that trap. It's good to have it, but it's a lot of work to sort through it too.
You think it's good to have a death pile?
For me, it is, because I need that, right? I need items around for times like this. Like, we're in winter.
Yeah.
And there's not as many yard sales. There's not as many deals out there. There are some auctions and stuff like that, but not nearly enough to keep things going and full. And if I'm paying rent, I need my booths full, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense otherwise, especially to have 3. So I need lots of inventory. I need lots of inventory that I can go to in times like this. I'm clearing out 2 rooms at the same time quite a bit. You know what I mean? So if I didn't have that backup inventory, I know a lot of people call it a death pile, and I kind of fall into calling that, but I just call it backup inventory.
Well, that's a much more positive way to look at it. Unfortunately for me, my death pile is not just for the winter. My death pile follows me through the winter, and then the spring, and the summer, and the fall.
Yeah.
And if I'm not careful, that temporary increase of inventory for the winter times doesn't ever go away. But like in this last week, we've been busy, and that's good. And we've been it's such a positive experience. It's funny though that you say your malls is so busy. I've heard all the malls are dead right now. But I guess I've been hearing incorrectly. Oh, dear.
We're not experiencing that at all. I
Yeah.
invite anybody to come to the Waterford Antique Market, located in Waterford, Ontario. It's between Brantford and Port Dover. Most people can find those places on a map or know where they are. And yeah, it is. I'm very happy with the results. Very happy. And, I mean, in an antique mall or market or whatever you want to call it, there's 70 plus to 80 vendors. It's 2 floors. It's quite a big one. But, I'm sitting here doing, $1,400 in a day. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That's like people are out buying. So I understand people's concern. Like, sure, the economy, a lot of people are struggling, but there's always people struggling, and there's always people that are going to
That,
continuously do well. You know what I mean?
that's true. I think I've heard every year someone say, well, with the economy nowadays, the economy's bad. I think I've heard that every year through the boom and the bust.
Yeah.
And
Well,
sure, it does change, but sometimes it's like a case of maybe you need to change something in your business. Maybe the market's not there.
probably a housing bubble or a housing crisis in a lot of ways. Like, I know it's very expensive, but I'm not saying they're great paying jobs, but there's a lot of great paying jobs out there. There's a lot of good paying jobs, and I don't think there's a shortage of jobs. It's a weird kind of, and I don't even want to call it a recession because I mean, they changed the meaning of a recession so
We're
much.
technically not in a recession
Living
right now.
around here, there's a lot of people they can't find help right now. You know what I mean? And they're paying $34 an hour. Toyota is paying, once you're in full rate, you start at $30 an hour, but once you're in full rate, you're like $42 an hour. It takes 4 years to get there. Full benefits. They can't hire people right now. They can't.
Right.
They're constantly hiring. They can't hire fast enough. Because a lot of people just don't want to work. You know what I mean? So don't get me wrong. I worked there. I worked there for many years, and I understand it's not the easiest job. But I worked there because you have to pay the bills, and I don't want to be misunderstood. I understand people are suffering, but sometimes I think there's options. That's all I'm saying. There's options. Without getting into it too much detail, there are options. You know what I mean? And if this reselling business wasn't working or turns and it's not working, I'm going back to Toyota. You know what I mean? I'm going to go back and I'm going to work one of those jobs that I don't like the hours and all this other stuff because it pays the bills and it pays so well.
So should we talk about what we can do to try and prevent you from going back to Toyota? What should we talk about? What we think makes a successful online store? Are you ready for that?
Well, I'd like to kind of touch both online
Yeah.
and antique markets. Like
Yeah.
I see people doing well on the online, like eBay or Etsy, and I also see people doing poorly in or hear of them. I also know that people are doing very well in the antique store, and you can be one booth over or one floor above, and you know what I mean. Like, and they're not doing as well. So, like, I'm not putting them down. I'm just thinking if you're not doing very well, you got to be able to pivot. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect to be doing well.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that then. So for the booths, now like you mentioned, you have 3 booths. I have a little tiny booth, so I'm still in the learning aspects of it. And but I have gone to antique markets and I have noticed things. What do you say is one of the big red flags for a booth when you go in and they're not doing well?
Uh, to go in and just look at a booth and say that, well, like, first of all, probably just looking at the product, but just knowing some people that aren't doing well,
So the prices are too high.
the
Yeah.
expectation
Yeah.
is so high that you tend to price high. And I think not changing up your booth, like not switching things around, like just moving it from one spot to another can
So
make it
so
look.
those are good things. So let's talk about each one a little bit more in detail. So you said not moving things around as one of the examples is a problem. Like I've noticed that when I go into some booths, I can go in 1 week, 2 week, a month later, 2 months later, and I can already see you're guessing what I'm going to say is that nothing has changed in the
Right.
booth. A lack of maintenance, a lack of just even moving things around to give if you don't have new inventory, to at least give the impression or put things in a different sight line can make a big difference.
For sure. For sure. So what I do is I'm constantly in there. When I go and take stuff to the booths, I do not just set item on an empty space on the shelf. I juggle for the most part. Like if I have a certain item that displays well
Yeah.
on a shelf, I'll probably leave it there. But for the most part, it's just individual items. It's not like a whole dish set or whatever, right? So it's individual items, and I will move them around. So I'll just keep pushing them over, creating a entirely full empty shelf, and I'll restock that entire shelf. You know what I mean? So everything is constantly getting shifted. Um,
Do you
and
have
I think
themes? Do you have themes in different parts of your booths, or
to a
is it a
degree,
random assortment?
there's themes like I'll have a you could call it a pulp culture type theme, but really, realistically, it's the records are always in the same spot, but the records are always being added to, and record
Right.
guys don't give a shit. They're just going to come out and they're going to see records and they're going to sift through them. So the records are kind of the same thing, and underneath my records, I have three totes, plastic totes, and they're filled with horror movie on DVD and Blu-ray, I guess, but it's all DVD to me. So you'll have that, and then next to that, you'll have some, maybe some concert videos, comic books, that kind of thing. That's kind of themed up. But for the most part, everything else is considered a collectible or an antique, and I just kind of shift them around. And
When I went into my booth and I made things really nice, I displayed things nice, I could tell. And coincidence or not, that stuff sold immediately because I displayed it nice. I didn't just have a bunch of shelves. I didn't treat it like here's a bunch of random knickknacks all lined up on a shelf, like Value Village style.
right.
I tried to present each little area. Like if I had a bunch of Pokemon, I tried to have all the Pokemon together. If I had like, for me, I've noticed that for my booth or my little whatever, is that there's certain prime spots at eye level to put stuff at. Because if I have stuff on the ground, which I do, I have stuff on the ground, it doesn't get a lot of looking at. Because the way we tend to scan at our head height.
I remember an old timer. He he had a bunch of airplanes, and he had them hanging from the ceiling, so he would have a string, and it looks like the airplane is mid-air, right?
Look cool, but
they cool. By some guy he comes, he had what 10 or 15 airplanes hanging up, different models, and somebody came in and asked if he had any airplanes, and, and he goes, yeah. He goes, oh, like where? And he goes, well, look up. You know what I mean?
It's silly.
It's silly,
but it's true. We tend to,
yeah.
We have blind spots in our vision where we concentrate where we're looking, and we could have great inventory like those airplanes. I'm sure were amazing, but he probably rarely sold any because no one just knew they're even there.
That I think just switching around does that on its own, and I constantly in there switching around. Not only that, like I'll switch around my shelving and stuff too, right? Like we have a vendor day once a month, and those are usually big days where I completely change up the booth, right?
It's like grocery stores. They do have prime level shelves and they have non-prime. It's just an idea. Like if you have a booth already and find maybe something isn't selling, maybe you have it physically in the wrong spot. Like for the records that you have, it probably doesn't matter as much which level it is at, as long as it's comfortable enough to look through, because they're not going to not see a big thing of records, because people who are buying records are probably looking for records.
Right. And once they know you have records, they'll keep coming back.
They'll go to that same spot. In that case, you probably don't want to move things around because you have a constant inventory. So another thing you mentioned, um, for booths that don't do as quite as well might be a pricing issue.
Pricing issues are, in my mind, probably the biggest issue. Do you want me to go into that, or do you have a point that you want to make on
Well,
that?
I just wanted to talk about like when I've gone into the Nostalgia Warehouse here in Ottawa. A lot of the booths have excellent stuff, but once in a while you'll find someone who has prices, and I'm not sure where they came up with the prices, and they're not at the current market, or they're at the hope debt market. It's like, oh, I bought this for 10. Well, I need to get 20, but it's only worth 5. And you see that stuff week after week after week. Hey, I get that. I've done that too. I've convinced, sold myself on buying something, realizing it's a mistake, and not wanting to price it correctly because then I know I've made a mistake, as opposed to, well, someone might come along and pay me $20 for this item that's worth 10. That happens sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But really, I don't think it's healthy for a booth because, oh, I can give an example. I went to a new thrift store here in Ottawa just yesterday, and I went in and they were asking higher than retail values for their stuff. Like, books, people complain about Value Village for books. The person was wanting $15 to $20 per book. They're only worth like $5. And all the stuff was like that. And I quickly turned around and left because there's no point. Do you think I'm going to go back anytime soon? No.
No.
If the price is really reasonable, like $8 or $5, okay, I might go back. But in this case, I realized that their pricing is so out of whack that my chance of actually finding a deal, because our buyers want deals too, is so low. I'm not going to go back.
You're doing a lot of harm by overpricing your stuff. It's better to underprice your stuff. And again, you make your money on your buy, not on your sell. So if you're overpricing stuff, you're pushing people away from your booth. You might not get that guy ever coming back, or girl, but that person ever coming back to your booth, which is going to affect even future sales. So you got to have, sure, there's some items that are going to be, a little hefty in prices, but they're good, solid, most likely rare items. And there's collectors for that. And your store. I can't go into any store. I can't just put stuff in any uh, auction house. Like some auction houses do better than others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some stores, some booths. So what you have to do is know your market and know what kind of prices they're willing to pay. Know what kind of competition is in your store. I have noticed.
Yeah.
Now I haven't been on eBay long enough to be able to talk about this, but I have noticed through the booths that there's changes every couple of years. It's a different demographic. It's a different type of buyer. So kind of pre-pandemic, when I first started out, there was a lot of things got crazy prices. Like, I'm not talking thousands, but I'm talking about like certain like canes and stuff like that aren't as good as I thought they were because I was new, but they still sold for $80. And really they're a $20-$25 item. I overpriced it, but there was still people in there that kind of felt whatever you're pricing at it is probably right.
And they're
trusting.
Really good.
They're trusting the guy that's pricing it, right?
Yeah.
But I think eBay has changed a lot of people's ability to look things up, so they know if you're overpricing things now. So when I first started 8 years ago, I probably going on 9 now. This, how do I say this without going long-winded? I use the eBay a lot more for pricing my items. So then after that, it kind of changed slowly, and then items kind of changed. There was a change in what items, and some items like metal signs have just exploded, like pop and stuff like that. So you kind of have to change. And now, since the pandemic, I'm finding there's a lot younger, there's a younger demographic buying things, but you know what I mean? They're not buying it because it's a piece of Canadiana. They're buying it because it's a right size and it's the right look. It's something that can fit in an apartment. It's something that could fit in their basement, or it's more. It's not going to hold the value because of the maker. It's going to have a value because it's artsy or it's decorative. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I was gonna make a joke. The reason that you're finding the buyers are younger is because we're getting older.
Well,
But back to the pricing thing, right? You were talking about eBay pricing and booth pricing, and I would agree with what you were just saying. Is that if you're pricing stuff for your eBay store, there's a lot more direct competition, because I believe that people don't really associate your store as much as a booth. So maybe I'll
right.
try and explain that better.
No, I get what you're saying.
Right. So for the audience, what I'm trying to say is if I go into Scotty's booth, it's Scotty's booth. And if I saw that he has a bunch of toys and stuff like that, I'm just really comparing the stuff in his own booth. But when I'm looking at Scotty's eBay store, I don't really see I'm not as confined physically. So there's a lot more competition. So when I see that Tonka train or whatever, well, it's not just Tonka's train in his booth. It's Tonka's train everyone is selling online, which is obvious. However, it makes a difference in the pricing. I think in some ways in your booth, you can almost get not a way is the wrong word, but sometimes you can ask for a bit of a premium sometimes, because the person's there. They don't have to have it shipped to them. It's in what they want, where they want it, as opposed to eBay, where if you go really far outside the boundaries of where the prices are, no one's going to buy from me if I'm selling exact same thing for 100 and Scotty's asking 80 for it online. Why would they buy, and why would they buy from me? So there is a bit of a difference for the pricing.
Yeah.
What I do online is I find there's always a balance between getting the value out of your product and getting your product out of your house, right? So for the other thing that you mentioned is the quality, the type of items that you have online, or the type of items that you have in the booth, right? You know, this doesn't happen too often, but I have gone into some flea markets or antique markets, and basically they have stuff on their shelving. And it's like, who on earth is ever going to buy this stuff?
The thing with the booth, some people like just to get out, grab a coffee, go around, and you can walk around that store and see history. You can see things that are nostalgic and remind you of the past. You know what I mean? You don't have to buy anything. And then you'll get the odd person buying. Well, I think you get a lot of people just buying on impulse. You know what I mean? Oh, that looks cool. You know what? You know, it's $15. I'm gonna grab it. You know what I mean? But you got the collector that'll come in there and they'll pay $245 for an oil can. You know what I mean? So,
in my experience, this is your best stuff that sells right away.
the best stuff does tend to sell quickly. Again, it's because there's collectors out there, but
and there's demand for it, right?
There's demand.
So for booths that are not being successful, what I've noticed is that all their stuff, the good stuff, is being cherry picked out, and they leave all the rest of the crap, and they don't want to get rid of it because they've already put the time into cleaning it and pricing and everything.
Yeah.
But do you think there's a negative effect when that happens? How do you deal with that?
So sometimes things take a while to sell. It's just the way it is. So do you want to drop it in price? Sometimes that doesn't mean it's going to sell quicker.
No.
Right. So, and it's hard to find everything that's going to sell within a week. Like, I don't think that's even possible.
Oh yeah, and I'm not even looking for those items in general.
But I've had things that sit around for a year and they sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So do you go out and buy that again? Well, maybe, but I'm definitely not going to pay a lot for it. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to sit on that money. And is it a throw in on other stuff that I buy? That's probably more likely.
But I think the point I was going to make is that if you have that low demand, low value stuff in your booth in a physical spot, it's going to end up costing you money, especially if you have death pile or profit pile or whatever stuff, good stuff that you're not putting in,
right?
Because you're waiting for more space to clear up. So, when you have the stuff that's not moving in your booth, it's actually costing you money, right? There's not so much online. Like online, like if you have stuff in your store, it's not really costing you, not really, maybe a listing fee if you're on Etsy, or maybe one of your allotments on eBay, but it's not really costing you a lot of money. But in the booth, When I had stuff in there that there was no demand, it's costing me money by not having the better stuff in there. But not only that, is when someone goes into your booth and they see a high portion of that non-desirable stuff, they might walk by too and not even see the gems that you have around.
It's kind of catch-22 because sometimes 100% I agree with that. You have stuff in there that should be taken out. You can take it to an auction, donate it, garbage it, whatever you want to do. But sometimes there's things in there that are super rare and super valuable.
Yeah.
But you just got to wait for that right person. Like, it's art, for instance, is a very tricky thing because the value is in the eye of the person that's looking at it or going to buy it, right? So
Yeah.
it could be worth some money. It could be a known artist, but you have to wait for that right person to come by and buy it. And those are good things to have in your booth too. So you also have, here's what I do without getting into too much of the dynamics of that and trying to analyze every item. I think overall, what I try to do is I have to come up with a magic number every month. So I have to have so much in sales to make what I'm doing worth it. Right now, I'm well exceeding my expectations.
Right.
If I'm not hitting those numbers, I'm
Yeah.
reevaluating what I'm putting in my booth. At the same time, there's many times I go in there and I'm like, why do I got this $2 item here?
That's
right?
the stuff I'm talking about. Yeah.
I got $30, $40 items at home that should be in this spot.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
But there is a place for those $5 items too, because people buy them a lot more because it is cheap. It's on impulse. It reminds them of the past, whatever it is, So those things chip away at your rent and their frequent sales. So for instance, I have bottle openers, right? Beer bottle openers, and they have little advertisements on it. But I can put 50 of them in a little container and people will rummage through them and they'll chip away, right?
Yeah, you can't have a flat rule when it comes to the pricing and stuff like that. It depends. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, the DVDs, like all I do is horror movies on DVDs. It's all horror movies. The odd time I'll throw in like a Superman 1 or Superman 2 with Christopher Reeve, something kind of still horror movie guys would understand, like sci-fi, that kind of thing. But for the most part, it is probably 98% horror movies. And I'll throw them in, I'll just drop them. Like I'm not even organize them. They're just messed up and they sit into 3 totes. And every time I go in, I'll take 10 or 20, sometimes but people will come in there and I've been in there for an hour and people are sitting there for almost the entire hour rummaging through them, looking to see the condition of the DVD, and they'll walk out with 10, 20 DVDs. I got 3. Sometimes I'll put $4 on them, but most of the time they're $3.
Yeah.
And they'll buy the DVDs for $3. You know what I mean? And you sell 10 of them, there's $30. All it's doing is they're sitting in there in a pile in 3 different totes underneath the records. You know what I mean?
I would make and I would say that pile of DVDs is kind of the same thing with it as the records, where people will not be put off by that pile of DVDs because they're probably looking for DVDs,
Yeah.
And you don't have to have them in a prime spot again, because people who look for DVDs know that they're going to be in that area. Should we talk a bit more about your eBay stores and what
100% we should be? Yes,
because I think the audience is going to be a good portion of that.
Yeah,
I think we covered a lot of it in the booth stuff as well about pricing. Online I find 89% is about right for me for the pricing. You should have lots of pictures. It's funny how people will take one little picture. I find pictures sell items. Make sure that if there's damage, you show it, because people want to feel comfortable when they're buying your items, and they don't want to have to ask you questions. And honestly, that's probably my weakest point, is if people ask me questions, I'm horrible at answering it. So I think the other thing, and this is one people might have different opinions on, but descriptions of your item. Now, some people write books, or some people are like me that basically just take the description and rewrite it. How do you feel? Do you think it makes a big difference to a sale or not, the description at the bottom?
To a degree. I think you have to make sure you put any flaws.
The flaws that you put in first, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
and
first words, actually.
that's more to protect yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's also a mobile thing because sometimes it's harder to read stuff on mobile. They hide the description where you have to click it, which is kind of annoying. But anyways, so often, like, what does everyone say? No one reads anymore. So if there's a major flaw with the item, I'll put that as the first words. Like, for example, I'm selling a VHS DVD player. My first words: no remote. What's in the title? No remote.
Yeah,
Because when you don't do that, you get a return, and that
yeah.
really blows away in profitability. I think, but people can be a little verbose. Find sometimes in their descriptions, and no one reads them, and then they complain. Well, how come no one read the fourth paragraph, second sentence where it says this? How
Yeah,
come no one read that? It's because it's too long. No one's reading all that stuff.
yeah. No, definitely keep it short to the point. Even if it's in point form, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do.
Yeah,
I know I kind of just basically have one or two sentences. I do start using AI, but that's for another discussion. The AI write up, but that's that's if somebody's really intense and wants to read, then that'll be the last thing they'll read. But for the most part, it's just a good description. It shows
yeah,
where. If it's a book, it's an old book. It's from 1800s. Therefore, it shows where from age and handling, such as corner bumping or scuff marks on the cover. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So some foxing on the first 3-4 pages. Uh, you just put in a good description of what's going on, right?
yeah. I think people get into trouble when they try and hide stuff, or they say my favorite
Or
thing,
they're
which is
not trying to
just look
hide
at
it, but it makes it look like they're trying to hide it.
or they say something like, just look at pictures for description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do put that in there too. For further details, please refer to the provided photos.
But you're also putting it in the verbal description. That's the difference.
100%.
It's when they
Yes.
don't put it there
Right.
and it's something major. Like, I think for certain things, like I remember when I first started, I worried about every little piece of paint loss on a box or something. But now I just generically say there's wear and tear, there's paint loss in general, and then that usually covers me. And I don't think, I honestly, knock on wood, I don't think I've ever had someone complain that my description is wrong. Usually it's the opposite. Usually it's better than described, and that covers me. What else do you think makes this because we've hear a lot of people complaining about their eBay sales? What do you think makes an eBay store fail? Is there anything else there that comes to mind?
Well, yeah. So I don't know. I think it's your photos. I think it's the way you list things. I
Yeah.
think, your pricing. I think it's all kind of the same, really. You just have to be willing to pivot, have an eclectic amount of stuff. I
Yeah,
think
and I think like a lot of that stuff has an effect on how well your store is going to go.
Yeah,
Because
and I
if
think
you're
you have to make sure you maintain the top rated seller. I think that's going to help because I think you have to make sure the buyer's happy at the end of the day. And I have no problem doing that. I want the buyer to be happy. If I'm going to get a little bit
right.
of a loss here and there, and at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything. I don't take it personally. I don't get me wrong. There's sometimes I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But at the end of the day, I just move on from it. You know what I mean? It's
So you're talking about the feedback percentages there, right?
Well, I'm talking about feedback, but I'm also talking about, complaints or things that are going to be a negative against your account in eBay's eyes, not necessarily the
Yeah.
reseller.
Oh, okay. Because it's like, when we're talking about stores that are doing well or not. So you're saying if you're not meeting some of these metrics, eBay is somehow going to hide your store. Is that how
Well,
you're referring to that?
well, to a degree, for sure, but they're not going to push your store. I mean, Adam felt that firsthand. You know what I mean? And he was
Right.
punished for a year, and now he's finally
Shipping
out of the
vintage for people who don't know.
yeah, he's finally out of the doghouse. So he's happy that way. He seems
Yeah.
to be back on the eBay, bandwagon. So
I guess for a lot of that stuff, I kind of wonder, like, how does eBay make people buy stuff? And that's why I kind of like the conspiracy theory. I think, for the feedback percentage, I don't think it's as nearly as important as people think, as long as you're above 96% or something. Like we all, like as sellers, we want 100% because we like seeing that 100% there.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, when it comes to the other side for the buyers, I think it's important, but I think it's not as important as we want it to be. Honestly, because I bought off people with 96 and 94 and not really thought much about it. I think a lot of people are like that, and I don't think we like that answer because we want it to make a bigger thing. It's like the top rated seller, we want that to make a huge difference. I'm not quite sure, but that's what ifs, right? Like we're talking about what ifs, and the higher, obviously, the better, right? You want that 100%. It's definitely better than 98%, better than 96%.
And
But I wouldn't lose it over that.
And maybe you're right, but in a different sort of way. So maybe if you're striving to keep the top rated seller and the 100%, it means a lot to you. You're going to do well because you're striving for that. I'm going to do well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're going to do better overall for a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know what I mean? Is your top rated seller a result of your sales? Or is your striving to that top rated seller? You know what I mean? So if you're striving to do 100% perfection and that's your goal, I think that's going to equate into more sales.
I hope so.
I think it has to. I think because there's a lot of variables. It's not just selling something and get 100%. You're making sure it's clean. It's not broken, right? You're buying
quality of your service. Yeah.
You're buying stuff that people want. You're pricing it properly and you're shipping it quickly. So you're doing all the right things because you want to succeed. Therefore, you will succeed.
Yeah, and I think there's a few other factors I think we can quickly go through because we're getting a little long here. So,
one more, just to because
sure.
You can say I want to succeed and throw garbage out there. You're a talker, not a doer. But if you're a doer, not a talker, you're going to succeed.
I feel more inspired just with those words. Okay, I just want to cover a couple more things very quickly. You talked about shipping. I do take 2-day shipping handling time.
Yeah,
I think that's sufficient. I don't think people who are buying off eBay are that care about that much. I did get a where's my thing, but that I could tell for that guy when he bought something, he's like, oh, this guy's gonna be a pain in the butt. But usually I rarely when he's shipping out myself. I think people accept that 2 days. But this, if you're willing to do the same day, it's definitely going to increase your sales. It's not going to make it worse. It's just you have to make the decision for your business. I think if you're doing 4 days or more for shipping, that is going to hurt your store for sure. Another big one is returns. The thing with the returns is I sometimes see people's stores and they're like, no returns, nothing. Once you get it, you bought it, blah, blah, blah. And that can definitely have a negative impact because when a buyer sees you have like 1,000 words on your return policy and your description, one, they're not going to read it. Number two, they're going to peg you as a difficult seller, as someone who's trying to look for problems before there is problems. And as a seller, we often do the opposite. We can kind of spot the problem buyers before they're even a problem. For return policy, what I do is I do have returns, but the buyer has to pay for the return back. Because the bottom line is, if a buyer says that it's item not as described or INAD, they can force a return on you no matter what your policy is. So for me, you might as well have returns on. What do you do, Scott, for that?
Well, I'll be honest, and I've heard that argument, and I tend to agree with it, and I'll probably change it. But right now, I do not accept returns. Although I do accept returns. Like if somebody complained about it, I honestly I don't accept the return. I just tell them to keep it, and I just fully refund them. And
I handle that the same way.
Yeah,
if they open a return, usually gives you a chance to do something about it first.
Yeah, so it's happened a handful of times. It's nothing to even worry about, right?
It's rare for me too.
It showed up broken. I think one guy ordered a pair of socks. It wasn't the right size. He ended up ordering another pair of socks from me. I think I've told this story before, and he was completely satisfied with it. I was questioning whether to send it to him or just block him. But so I think he was legit, obviously, right? So, but I just, there was a couple incidences, and I just keep it. I don't want to deal with it. Just keep it. But I do have no returns, and I also do not turn on my best offer. I keep it. This is my price. That's what I want. However, if somebody becomes a watcher on an item, I will send them a lower offer immediately. If they're interested in it now, I want to make that sale now. I don't want to wait 2 months down the road, and if they haven't bought it or it hasn't sold, I'll just give them an offer right up front. But I do not have best offers turned on, and that's because they're interested in that item. I don't want them to go find another item for cheaper. I want here's $10 off. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah. So for pricing, I do the same thing. I don't have best offers on. I would argue that having best offers on is going to mean you're going to sell a lot more stuff.
But
However, I also believe that it requires a lot more work from me. And as Carl, the lazy reseller, I had the word lazy in there, but also the lazy means efficient. And I don't like going back and forth on the price. So actually, that's the reason I don't have best offer. I also have a totally with no evidence theory that people who buy outright without negotiating are less of a pain in the butt buyers.
Yeah,
I think the ones that try to negotiate back and forth tend to be a higher percentage of problem buyers. But I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's how I feel. I think the other good thing, if you want to have a better store, is have things like combined shipping already in your policies. Because just the other day, I had a combined shipping of 2 cameras that already had the combined shipping in my policies. And because of that, I might have done 2 sales as opposed to 1 sale. Yeah, it's like all these things we're mentioning kind of add up to either move your sales up a little bit or down a little bit. The chance of selling something, right? I think also another one is, do you make people do immediate payment or do you let them pay later?
If you look at my older half of my items, probably pay whenever. But recently, I've been hitting pay immediately. The problem is I've had other people say, if I buy it now, do you mind if I don't pay until, they buy it on a Monday, but I'll pay it Friday? You know what I mean?
And
so
how
I'm
often
like,
do they do that?
What's that?
How often does that actually happen?
I would say a handful of times, like probably 10 or less, but it has happened. And they've
I meant following up and actually paying.
Oh no, they've always paid.
Oh, really?
I've never
Okay,
had
good.
it where they've not paid.
Okay.
I think what's happened is they like an item, so it's a sale. So I'm gonna like, it's already a sale. So why would I say no to that? But I always follow up in the message. Listen, I'm okay with that, but sometimes eBay will automatically send you an invoice or a must pay notice. Just kind of ignore it because it's not for me. It's just automated. But I have no problem with that. You know what I mean? So maybe I'm wrong into saying to ignore it because maybe that puts a ding on their mark, but I don't know. But I just tell them, you're going to get this notification from eBay. It's automated. Nothing I can do about it. But for me, I'm good with that.
So for me, what I do is I have pay right away. If I had pay later, I think I'd actually probably would increase sales because why would it not? It's like give up. But at the same time, I find it's the same thing with the other thing I just said with if they have to pay immediately, I find there's less BS. And so that's the other reason I have it. Once I have my phone cha-chings, I've been paid. There's no more time I have to invest in that transaction. Instead, apart from shipping, of course.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. But if I wanted to increase my sales, that could be one way of doing it. I'm not going to do it though, because I value my time of not having to follow up. Even though eBay does it automatically, I'd rather not.
So just to be clear on my part, I've had to have people buy items, not pay immediately, and it sit for 3 or 4 days before I could clear it. That's happened. But when I get a message saying I would like to pay this on Friday, do you mind? Those ones I've always paid.
Those ones I could probably count on one hand or even less how many of those messages I've gone. I can't say I've never gotten them.
Yeah.
But I would say I can't quite remember because the sample size is too small. Like 3 times, and then 2 out of the 3 times they never got back to me or were paid.
Yeah,
But
no,
that's
I've
just a
I've had
small
it
amount.
probably I've had it 10 or less, like within
Yeah.
the 10 amount range. So
So,
I
is
don't
there anything else you wanted to add for online for what makes a store successful or not successful? I just have one more, last thing I wanted to add.
Well, I just want to clarify that I do not consider myself a professional by any means. I am not trying to give anyone advice. We are just kind of shooting the crap. You know what I mean? We're just shooting the breeze and
Right.
and going off of our experiences. That at least I am. So I wouldn't want anybody to kind of like, oh, what does Scott know? You know what I mean? I've been doing this for 20 years. Well, you know what? I've been doing it for just over 2 years and I've been doing pretty good with it. I have 8 years of experience selling. So I do have a knowledge base based on experience, but I'm not telling you it's right for everybody, but I'm telling you, I couldn't be happier with the results I'm getting. My
Right.
store on online on eBay is less than five or less than 600. It's I think the most I've had is like 575 or 580, something like that items. But I have probably 700, almost 700 sales on eBay and probably another 3, 4, 500 on Etsy because Steph and I had an account where I was doing it, but it was under her name. So we dropped that account, went on Etsy. Now I've got another 62 sales just on this newer Etsy account. So, you know, I think I'm closing in on 1,000 items, which, if you got 10,000 sales, it doesn't, but I think 1,000 items is more than enough to show that you kind of have experience doing it. And I don't have 20,000 listings to get 1,000 sales. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
think my items speak for themselves. If I'm having 10,000, 15, 20,000 items and I'm only doing 1,000 sales, but my 1,000 sales represent a listing of 500 to 600 items. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think my items are correct. My pricing has to be correct. I'm top rated seller. So I think I'm doing things right only because I care. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying anyone has to follow what I'm doing. I am not saying that at all. Go do your own thing. I'm just saying this works for me. I'm happy with it. And I'm going to continue to always judge myself to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I would say do exactly what I tell you to do, and you're going to do amazing. I'm right in everything I say. Oh, obviously, I just pull Scotty's like, yeah, this is all, of course, all just our opinion, and we have the right to change our minds.
Yeah.
And
And
different
I
data come up, but we're just talking from our experience and what we've seen.
and I
Uh,
change my mind all the time. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like I change my prices, I change my items. Like I think that's the way of growth. I think everyone has to and everyone does that's successful. And if this all falls apart tomorrow, I'm going to come on the next show and I'm going to say, "Hey, listen, I'm a failure. Everything I've done is like horrible. I
yeah,
would never do it this
you
way again."
will. Okay,
But
okay,
I'm willing to admit that, and I'm willing to move on and pivot
yeah,
and change. And I think the thing is, it's your sourcing, which we'll have to do a show on sourcing. But I think like there's people out there buying, and there's a lots of items out there for sale. And if you're willing to go and look for those items, you'll find those items for cheap.
yeah,
That's the way I'm seeing it.
yeah. And I think, like we talked about, whether or not you have a online store like I do mostly, or if you have the booths, it's like there are certain things that can give you like little bonuses to your sales. I think the other big thing, of course, is to make sure you have stuff in your store that people actually want,
Yeah.
especially online.
But that's up to you. That's up to you to research that
Yeah,
and make sure you're buying those items.
yeah,
All right, Carl. I think that's pretty much it. Like, as far as the good and the bad and the ugly, I think it comes out to just constantly thinking about it and pivoting and making sure you know why you're doing good or bad and monitoring it. That's probably at the end of the day what it all comes down to. What do you think?
yeah. I hope we gave some just specific things that we look at when it comes to stores and booths as well. That gives you a chance to improve or see why there's a problem. But if anyone has any other suggestions, we'd love to hear it in the feedback. And I just want to say thank you for everyone who listened to us this week.
Yeah, for sure. Don't forget to hit the subscriber button if you're on YouTube. And if you catch us on Spotify, I think you can leave comments there too. So we're always reading the comments and love to hear the comments. And yeah, so I'm happy with that. And that's the end of podcast number 6.
Yeah, and I just want to add one little thing at the end is next week I'm going to be on the Two Dogs Digs channel at 8 p.m. and where we talk about last month's sales. So if you want to see my face, see it on Two Dogs Digs. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, all right, cool. And I will definitely be watching that one, Carl. Yeah, so anyway, until next week, have a good one.
Bye, everyone.